Mandy Friedman here, licensed professional clinical counselor, clinically certified domestic violence counselor, clinically certified trauma professional, and the creator of SNAP, Survivors of Narcissistic and Abusive Personalities. And we are back talking about Succession Season 3. We are talking about Greg the Egg with my brother Andrew. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, Mandy. I'm happy to be back to talk all about Greg the Egg in Season 3. He has, pretty interesting season, some interpersonal things we'll talk about, some relationships with Greg, romantic or otherwise. At the beginning of Season 3, Kendall has made his big move against his dad, and so we have this division. Who's on Kendall's team? Who's on Logan's team? Who's on their own team? And Greg has decided to go with Kendall for now.
There's a scene where they're in the limousine together, and he tells Greg to start monitoring social media, which would be something a PR person would do. But Greg gets his phone out and he's like, yeah, kind of like that he's doing the job. But really what's happening there is Kendall's immediately giving him some kind of responsibility. You know, he wants people to be on board. So even though he doesn't know what he's doing and he basically has no skills, it's a way of getting Greg to be on his team.
And this season for Greg, a lot of it is just kind of going through who's putting pressure on him now. And at this time, the beginning, it's Kendall putting the pressure on him. You know, he wants Greg to make moves on his behalf. And if he doesn't, might have to burn him.
He might have to burn him.
So, another person who is putting pressure on Greg is his grandfather. We learned that his grandfather might be cutting him off. And there's a struggle with a lawyer. Tell me about this lawyer thing and how that works into the dynamics here.
Greg goes to his grandfather, Ewan, asking for help because he thinks he's in trouble. He doesn't want to use the lawyers for Waystar because that would be silly. So, and he doesn't have any money. He doesn't know anybody. So he goes to Ewan and asks for help. And Ewan decides that he's going to help him. But what Greg doesn't realize is that Ewan's picking the lawyer, and that the lawyer that he's picking is like a buddy of his, and that they're launching their own anti-Logan campaign. What Greg realizes is that he can be a pawn for this side, or he could be a pawn for this side. He could be bullied by this side, or he could be bullied by this side. And now he's weighing throughout the season which side is going to benefit him.
One of the people who is putting pressure on Greg to join Logan's side is Tom. And Tom is bullying him at every which way, pressuring him to fall in line.
Tom is bullying Greg. He's been bullying Greg. It could also be said that he is grooming Greg. In some situations, bullying tends to be grooming. So he gives Greg a new office, which is actually like an old copy room, like storage closet kind of thing. So he's being ostracized now because he's not on the right side of things.
He's getting a gift of a new office from Tom, but he also gets a gift of a new watch from Kendall.
They are in the limousine playing good tweet, bad tweet, where the game is to read tweets that are, complimentary of Kendall, and then tweets that are not complimentary. And some of the ones that aren't complimentary are so cringingly true that it just hurts to watch. But then you just see, and then they're fine and they just keep on partying. But in this limo, Kendall gives Greg a really nice watch. And Greg is like, wow. The thing is, later on, he finds out that Kendall isn't giving him the watch. Kendall says, no, I was just going to hook you up. In other words, with the jeweler. That I think the jeweler was at the party.
He's hanging out with him. Yeah, he's playing
there.
Good. He's playing good tweet, bad tweet with him,
Exactly. So the hookup wasn't that he's buying him the watch. The hookup was that he was going to hook him up with the watch dealer. But this is another example of future faking and how Kendall is sort of putting carrot on a stick to keep Greg in place. At one point, Kendall says to Greg, I'm not your sugar daddy.
That scene's amazing because Kendall, is offering this great thing to Greg, and Greg's like, wow, he needs these things. Like a really nice watch is like a suit. It's an important part of his outfit, and his costume, I guess he's wearing. And so he's going to get this great piece to go along with it. Think about all the clout he'll get for this amazing watch. And then Kendall, pulls the rug right out from under him. It's really funny, and we all saw it coming, but it was great. We've already detailed a little bit how we have Tom, we have Kendall bullying and pressuring Greg. We also have Logan pulling out the full court press. So the point is here, because Greg is maybe going to get in trouble for, some of these documents and things like that in the cruise division, that they want him, Waystar Royco wants him to go with their lawyers, so it's a united front, so they can all say the same thing. Having him out there with another lawyer is basically just a piece on the chessboard that's somewhere that's out of control. So Logan really wants to control him and really pressures Greg.
Logan reaches out to Greg and says he wants to meet, and Greg clears this with Kendall. And Kendall's like, no, you should go, but go as my spy. And he believes that Greg is solid. And Greg reports to Logan, and he makes Greg a drink. And I think he makes the comment something like, what Greg wants, Greg must have. I mean, imagine having Logan Roy make you a drink. I mean, he asks you want a drink, and Greg's like, yeah, sure. I think he asked for a Jack and Coke or a rum and Coke or something like that. And Logan's like, okay. Like, he didn't mean it. Like, he didn't want to make him a drink. He threatens Greg's job at Waystar by saying that if he continues to side with Kendall, that, he'll have to let him go. And then he puts legal papers in front of him to sign so that he would sign in with their joint defense, like what you just described. And Greg is smart. He has been transactional. He's learned from them, and he knows that everything is a transaction, and he knows to ask for something in return, but right now he can't come up with what to ask for. So he basically says that he wants to think about it and then come back with what his ask will be.
Yeah, and that's smart of Greg. However, it leaves him still hanging out there as a thread, and Logan doesn't like that, and neither does anybody else. Tom has an interesting tale to tell.
I guess Logan's calling him backup, by sending Tom in now. He made his pass at Greg. Now Tom's going to go in for a pass. And he is really clamping down in this threatening, bullying way. But, the way that they threaten, they're not threatening with a knife in their hand. They're threatening with a smile on their face. So I think that is just one of the really great things about this show, is they really capture how manipulative these people can be. So he tells them the story of Nero and Sporus, in that Nero pushed his wife down the stairs and then castrated Sporus and made him dress like his dead wife. And Tom says to Greg, I'd castrate you and marry you in a heartbeat. And he says it with a twinkle in his eye, almost like nostalgic at the thought of Greg rising through the ranks, while Tom's in prison. And yeah, so that was funny.
Their relationship is so strained. It's pushing boundaries in ways like you can see them feel each other out. That's kind of what's going on here a little bit, is they feel each other out, and it's like little kids just saying words to see what people will say.
You could also picture dogs, that are grouping and meeting each other, like a dog that another dog doesn't know, and how they sniff around each other and kind of make little moves and see, who they're trying to figure out the pecking order and who's the alpha, who's the leader of the pack. And Tom is saying, I'm the leader of the pack, but I'll let you be, right behind me if you want to come with me. And he tries to wrestle with Greg at this point, and when Greg says no, Tom gets mad like a child and says, he was just joking. Like, it was just joking. God, you can't even take a joke, which is what manipulative bullies say when people call them on their bullying behavior, is that it was just a joke. But yeah, so Tom is taking his pass at Greg, trying to say, come on, you need to be on side.
And it doesn't work immediately. So he just starts pushing him. He's like, my story about an ancient, Roman emperor who made a wife out of one of his male slaves, that didn't work, so I'm going to use violence. And Greg says no, and it's a great moment. I love it. So not only are all these other people bullying, but Ewan is coming back around to bully Greg here, because he has found out that, about this meeting with Logan, and he's suspicious that Greg is going to go with Logan. So he says, you know what? Your inheritance, giving it all to Greenpeace. And, it's interesting because Ewan kind of treats Greg like Logan treats his children.
And this scene where Ewan informs Greg that he's cut out of the will is really funny. And he says, nevertheless, I have tried as much as I'm able to show you love and compassion. That's what Ewan says to Greg, love and compassion. I mean, he's like the coldest grandpa ever. And now I hear that you've dispensed with Roger's services. That's his buddy, the lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably to throw your lot in with my brother and his gang of crapulous shills. In the conversation where Ewan is informing him that he's going to be giving all his money away to Greenpeace, Greg's reaction was, even my part? And Ewan says, that was the first part.
So, in other words, I'm not doing this to help Greenpeace or the world. I'm doing it to spite you for what you're doing. Greg decides that he's going to get his money one way or the other.
First, he calls someone to inquire if it's possible to sue a grandparent in an affectionate way. He says, in a way that says, I love you and I'm glad you're part of my life, but I am taking legal action against you. Hey, it doesn't hurt to ask. You never know. But then word gets around, he's going to sue Greenpeace, and Tom likes this. He's like, you're suing Greenpeace? I like your style, Greg. Who are you going to sue next? Save the children? But this actually bumps him up the ladder by being this, selfish, cutthroat, entitled, not giving a shit who you're hurting. You're not good, you're not bad, you're just out for yourself. And he would like to have someone like that as his right-hand man. So he's happy to see that in Greg.
Greg and Tom also have a conversation about getting burned because he says, well, so Kendall's going to be real mad when he finds out about this. He says he's going to burn me. So what might that be like? And also, we're both going to go to prison maybe. Let's do some exposure therapy at Denny's.
Right. So they're doing this exposure therapy at Denny's, trying to get Tom ready for prison food. And Greg discloses to Tom that around the office, they're calling Tom the Christmas tree. And the reason is because they're basically, if you have a crime to unload, you can hang it on Tom like an ornament. Tom is giving him some helpful tips, not so helpful tips as to how you would survive prison. And one of the things he says is that you should eradicate hope, because they can't get you if you got no hope. Very deep stuff coming from Tom. Greg makes a huge move, and he just flat out asks Tom, hey, do you suppose that you would have a room for another bauble on a branch? In other words, can he hang his crimes on Tom as well? That's a big deal for him to do that, and it was the right move at the right time, and gained him even more respect from Tom, that he would say, hey, Christmas tree, you can take one of my ornaments, right? Tom easily agrees. Tom seems to be okay with this, and he easily agrees. Greg's like, what, no quid pro quo? Like, there's no ask coming back in the direction I just asked you for something big. Why aren't you asking me for something? But Tom doesn't ask him for anything. He is making serious moves, Tom. We see this happening right here in this moment, just like he did with Logan. He offered to be the one hung out, and he said he didn't want anything in return. And just now, Greg's making an ask, and he's not asking for anything in return. And that is giving him more of a position for what happens later.
This is maybe one of the first times that we're seeing this about him, where he's not asking for anything back. And that is key for what happens with him going through the entire series. Because I can't wait to talk about Tom's season 4. It's maybe the most interesting season 4 of anybody else. And we'll get to that at some point. But we have to go to the presidential anointing summit thing. And this is where they're deciding who is going to be the next candidate for Republicans, and therefore who is going to be the next president. And, Logan's asking him, hey, would you vote for Connor? But Greg stands up for his country.
He does. he's told to leave the room like a child. But on his way out, he says, I just want to say, I think I owe it to my country to say, I don't think you should crown or make Connor president. That's it. Thank you. Good night. But as he's walking away, you see Logan, he took notice of that. And I wonder what his facial expression was about, but he kind of looks down and he kind of grins when he sees that, Greg puffed up there and said what he thought. And I wonder if it's like, is that a reminder of what a conscience sounds like? And so that's like for Logan, like, oh, isn't that cute? Kid's got conscience. Or is it like, oh, he's, we're training him well. Or look at the balls on Greg. I don't know, but he takes notice is the point. He takes notice of Greg.
Also, at the anointing ceremony, Greg is celebrated as a hero. Hip hip hooray! Why? Because he's suing Greenpeace.
They're literally hoisting him in the air and celebrating him once they all learn that he's suing Greenpeace. He is the king now.
Wow. That's incredible. And that's the kind of stuff that happens on this show sometimes that's just like, man, that's probably real. That's probably a real story that came from somewhere, and holy shit. But we get a big moment here for Tom, and it's a big moment for Greg too, because Tom finds out that he's not going to go to jail. No jail time for Tom. He's excited. He celebrates with Greg.
So excited that he goes into Greg's new office and trashes it, flips the desk over. And then at a certain point, he grabs Greg's face and kisses him on the forehead.
Doesn't have to be sporous, I guess. Let's get into some of Greg's relationships or attempts at relationships this season of the romantic variety. So he has a couple different interests. And, one of them is Comfrey, who is Kendall's main assistant, right? And he is going to maybe ask her out, but he asks Kendall first.
He does. And Kendall shuts him down and says, no. What if I want to date her? So he wants first dibs, if someone's going to do it, it's going to be me. And at a certain point, Greg is interacting with Comfrey, and Comfrey is telling him, hey, just so you know, Kendall is having me launch a smear campaign against you, but it's just business, nothing personal. So she's like, it's just an awkward, funny conversation to have. Well, he takes that opportunity to tell her that Kendall has said that he's not allowed to date her. Mm-hmm. Well, apparently this was the straw for Comfrey, because after the ridiculous shit Kendall is having her do, she's about done. This birthday party has sent her over the edge. And when they started this conversation, she told Greg that Kendall was having her call Bruce Springsteen to see if he can rescue the vibe of the party. And then she has to find a jetpack that he can leave through the retractable ceiling, which takes 48 hours to move. She's so tired of Kendall's shit from this birthday party that she says yes to Greg. Greg wins.
He wins.
He wins.
That's amazing. Do you think that Greg knew a little bit in his heart that if he told her that was going to, work out for him better? I think he did. I think there was a little manipulation there by Greg. Our boy's growing up. Comfrey and Greg go to Caroline's wedding seemingly together. But will she like the real him?
Yeah. You know how when you're new in a relationship, there's this imposter syndrome feeling of what if they found out about the real me? Would they still like me? Because maybe you have shame over some things, or, but he means it literally, because he realizes that he's misrepresenting himself. So he's asking Shiv and Tom, what if she finds out who I really am? What if she knows the real me? Will she still want to be with me? But he doesn't mean it in that introspective kind of way. He means it in I'm pulling the wool over her eyes. What's she going to do when she finds out? Shiv makes a really good point. She says, well, whatever happens with Comfrey, this is really great for your date ladder. Mm-hmm. And Greg's ear perks up. Date ladder. What? Yeah. So if you can date someone here on the ladder, then that means that you could date someone here on the ladder. And he immediately starts scanning the wedding, looking at the women and sizing them up, like immediately. Like, oh, she was just a stepping stone. Fantastic. Who's next?
He didn't realize that his life and relationships of the romantic nature is similar to his life in the corporate world, you know, and of course he should have known they're going to see it that way. But also something we didn't mention is that everyone is telling him Comfrey's out of his league. So the fact that he comes to the wedding with her impresses Shiv and tells him, oh, you went up the rung on the ladder. Well, time for the next rung.
And who's next? The Countess.
There's actual royalty at the wedding, and this is who Greg goes after.
And he winds up sitting between them. One side he's got the Countess, and the other side he has Comfrey, and he is just so pleased with himself. He says, the verdict is love, Your Honor.
I love it. That's fun. It's fun to see Greg succeed at, you know, things that don't matter that much. You know what I mean? It's nice. But man, he had quite an adventure this season. We wrap up this season, though, with Tom and Greg discussing their souls.
Yeah. So right now at the wedding, things are happening, and there's going to be a shift. And Tom is kind of figuring it out. Shiv's doing something. Tom's doing something. And Tom finds Greg and says, something is happening. Things are shifting. Do you want to come with me? Greg asks if he can have more information before making that decision. Tom says no. So Tom's been grooming Greg so well from the beginning. Tom says, I might need you as my attack dog, like a Gregweiler. Greg is not into it. He says that he has his own things going on and that he's kind of a big deal. Tom moves in to call in the favors. He says, who has ever looked out for you in this fucking family, huh? Greg says, well, can you tell me the direction I'd be heading if I come with you? Tom says, you would be moving away from the endless middle and toward the bottom of the top. And this lights Greg up, the bottom of the top. That sounds pretty good. And he says, Greg asks if he can have his own people. Tom says, you want to have your own Greg? You can have 20 Gregs. Do you want to deal with the devil? And Greg says, well, what am I going to do with a soul anyways? Souls are boring. And Tom laughs, and Greg says, of course, I'm in. And then they shake hands and they hug. Who needs a soul?
Nah, souls are overrated. But you know what's not overrated is Greg. I love Greg. He's always fun to talk about. Mandy, who are we going to talk about on the next episode?
In our next episode, we will be talking about Tom Wamsgans. Tom, the Tom, big T, Tom.
And, you know, that's appropriate because we just talked about Tom a little bit. We're going to go into more detail about some of the things that happened during the season for sure. I look forward to it.
And thank you for watching or listening. Goodbye.